Hello and welcome to Business Rescue with Begbie's Trainer, the podcast designed to give you advice, reassurance and assistance if you're a business owner struggling in these times. I'm John Ellis. As ever, I'm joined by an expert in the field of business recovery and restructuring. He's a partner at Begbie's Trainer. It's Gerald Krasner. Hi, Gerald.
Hi.
Wisdom ready to be dispensed?
Yeah.
He's locked and loaded. We're calling this one Changing Your Business Model, Adapt or Die. Now, in our previous podcast, we discussed the problems and solutions of exiting lockdown as a business owner when that time comes. Gerald's mantra for that period was that before you can get to the long term, you have to get through the short term. This week, we are looking a little bit further along that road, what you might have to consider, how best to go about it. Calculations, Gerald, easier to make, advice simpler to give if you know all the information required. Why do we need to change our business model? What's the purpose for it? Why will we have to?
Because the business model of 2019 will, to some degree, be obsolete in 2020. Some industries, to a much greater degree, such as the aviation industry, that has got massive problems.
Now, over the past few days, I've heard, I think, British Airways, Ryanair, Virgin, all talking about making redundancies in the wake of coronavirus. It may be chance, it may just be something I've picked up, but it seems to be that the number that they're talking about is 3,000. Is that a chance thing that I've picked that up?
I think, bear in mind, each operator have different number of employees. It's pure coincidence.
Right.
What I think they've done is done the first wave of redundancies, unknown redundancies. What they didn't want to do is make too many and then have to pull some back if things improve. That doesn't mean there won't be another wave of redundancies if things don't work out. They will have a business model going forward, but that business model could change by the week in the light of new events.
Is that something that's easy to do? But how do you go about changing your business model?
Well, it depends whether you're a large aircraft company or you're a restaurant. You know, there's a lot of businesses in between. And what you've got to think of is, under coming out of lockdown, we've still got this 2-meter gap between employees. How do you make that work in the business environment? You have to find what your customers want. Can they afford to pay for it even? You're going to have to look at all sorts of things to set up a model that will actually make you money, not maybe immediately, but in the medium term, let's say now.
I suppose that, when you're talking about the 2-meter, the distance rule, in terms of aviation, certainly that's going to make a difference. For the first time ever, you're going to have a seat with absolute comfort because there's going to be nobody either side of you, one would have thought.
Well, I would hope so, but if we look at what Aer Lingus did this week, it didn't quite work out that way, did it?
Well, and obviously there'll be staff in the flights as well. Restaurants we've spoken about a little bit in the previous episode, whereby they're going to have that 2-meter rule as well.
Well, it was interesting to see in Italy, which is coming out of lockdown, that there was a restaurant where they'd moved the tables slightly further apart and put perspex screens between each table, which is a very interesting idea, because that will give confidence to people to actually go in and start eating out again.
It's almost like back to the 60s in America, where you would slip into your own booth, if you like, and
that's right, yeah.
Self-contained.
I'm old enough to remember.
What should you consider when you're changing your business model then? I mean, we're looking at various different types, but there must be certain things that are common to all.
Yes, I think the first thing you'd look at is, does the new model earn a profit eventually? How will it work practically? You need to have a test run to make sure it works. We can all devise all sorts of models, but do they actually work in reality?
So it's a little bit of trial and error, presumably. You're going to estimate before you go in, but you're constantly adjusting and tweaking and changing.
Well, I think while we've got lockdown on and your restaurants are all shut, I think you come up with 2 or 3 business models if you can. If you've got the time, sit down and do 3 versions of it to see which one you should adapt to.
Yeah, there's a restaurant not too far from us, and recently they started doing weekend takeaway. So you drive up to a window and collect your meal. That went huge. So now they've decided to try a couple of evenings a week to see if the demand is there for that as well. Constantly trying to tweak
Yes,
their
that,
business
that
model. That's
will
the sort of
make a
thing they're
profit in
suggesting.
the long term when
It
the
would.
restaurant's open. No, it's a holding operation, that. The other one is home deliveries. Book your Sunday lunch, and if you live within 2 miles, it'll be delivered to you.
Yeah, that's it. That one, and drinks as well. I noticed frozen cocktails being delivered
Well,
to
if they've
homes
got
as
a
well.
license, good luck to them.
Okay, so changing the business model, you have to constantly tweak and adapt. How do you go about it?
Well, you start with a basic model. What is your existing model? Which bits of it won't be allowed under the lockdown, coming out of lockdown rules? How do you change it? How many staff do you now need to make it work in the early days? Bearing in mind, I think restaurants and coffee shops and that sort will be working at 30% capacity after the first week of celebration.
I'm going to ask you this because I don't mind setting myself up to be the fall guy for this, Gerald. But are there set business models or templates that you can follow for survival for changing things?
I don't think there's a one size fits all. Even in the restaurant industry, there's such variety that you have to take a basic structure, and there'll be something on the net that will give you a basic idea of how to do cash flows and things like that. But you have to adapt it to your business. You believe your business is unique. The word unique is used very casually, but you think you're giving a service that nobody else can. You therefore have to adapt the model to that service. You may find you have to change the service.
There are bound to be things in this period which businesses have sort of stumbled across that will actually benefit them in the longer term. I spoke to someone the other day who regards their company as forward thinking, quite advanced when it comes to catering for their employees' needs. And his opinion was, if working from home is something that's mostly worked out for you, if you enjoyed adapting to that, then his company may look into making that happen, say 2 or 3 days a week. If we tiptoe out of lockdown over 3 to 6 months, as you suggested previously, or worse, if we have to turn about and go back into lockdown again, the concept of working from home is surely one that's going to be around for a while.
I think it could be here permanently. Taking my own firm's example, our productivity has actually gone up in terms of chargeable hours with people working from home. We're now looking that when we open the office, in part, not everybody's coming back. Mm-hmm. We're going to rotate staff so that you work at home 3 days and come in the office 2. Some staff will want to work at home permanently, and if they can do their job, why not? Saves them money, and it increases our productivity.
So would you, looking at your own business, for example, would that business consider full-time working from home then?
For certain people, yes. But my business is very much at my end, meeting people. And whilst we're doing this over the computer, part of my business is to make a human judgment. And even though I'm looking in your eyes, I can't feel something back that tells me whether you're a nice human being or not.
I'm a killer, Gerald. I'm a killer. What sort of effect would it have on the economy if we all worked from home?
That can't happen. We all work from home. The property market's finished. That will not happen in my lifetime, even if I reach Captain Tom's age. I think a vast majority will work from home. We've got other problems coming, such as climate change and artificial intelligence, that we're going to have to adapt to. And it's not just this pandemic.
No, obviously. If you were working from home, though, can companies then pay you less? You know, you're not coming into the office. Therefore, you've got a perk of staying at home. We're giving you that as a prerequisite. Can they pay you less?
Speaking as a trade union leader, I would say no. I think maybe on new employees, you could get a different sort of contract of employment. I don't think we'll have 0-hour contracts, but we can have flexible contracts with a minimum and a top-up. Existing employees is different. Nobody will want to make a pay cut. They've got costs. They don't get a free cup of tea working at home, do they? You have to provide your own tea and milk. So good employers will not seek to penalise workers. I think that would be wrong. I'm not saying it won't happen, because there's bad employers as well.
Well, you see, we were talking about this yesterday before we got down to recording today's show, and we were thinking about, would companies have to provide certain infrastructures if you're working from home? How would it affect, for example, business insurance? If you're working from home and all of a sudden you trip down the stairs or whatever,
Well,
who's liable for that?
funny you raised that. I was speaking to a client earlier today who was checked up on his insurance policy, and it's covered. Employers' liability is covered for workers at home. So if you are in business, check your insurance policy, because what you don't want, somebody falls down the stairs at home while working for you, is going to claim off the company. You want to be insured. Check with your insurers. They may want further details in the light of working at home, but the employer has a responsibility to cover that insurance.
Any other pros and cons from the point of view of the business owner or the employee as regards working from home?
Well, you've got a lot of flexibility. I mean, I don't know about you, but my sleeping patterns are shot to hell at the moment. In all honesty, I've been up at 2:00 in the morning on the laptop because I was wide awake.
Yeah.
So I did a couple of hours, then went back to bed.
This is
when you have to go into an office, does it?
Yeah, this is you were talking about how your company's productivity is up just now with the working from home scenario, and it got me to thinking, well, people don't want to be seen in a bad light. They don't want to be seen as slacking off and binge watching a box set on TV. So maybe they're going that little bit harder to prove that they're not at the moment. That might level out over time.
Well, I think there's always a worry on furlough at the moment. People don't want to be furloughed, particularly if they're working at home. They're getting full pay. We're helping them out as far as possible. They've all been given laptops. And I like to think the office I work in has only got 15 people. It's a family atmosphere. It's pulling together.
I guess in this situation, when we're looking at companies tiptoeing slightly further down the road and coming out of lockdown, anything that they can get for free is always good. And we've spoken before about the idea of a mentor for you as a business owner.
Well, I'll start with what I've always said to people, that free advice is worth what you pay for it. But in all seriousness, mentors are invaluable. I've got 50 years experience in my industry. I'm not very good on computers, but when I find somebody who is, we fit together very well. I bring something to the table, they bring something to the table. So if you're starting out on a new business or you want some advice, there'll be lots of people who have retired who will be willing to give maybe 4 or 5 hours a week, maybe 10 hours a week, maybe full time. I don't know. They're out there. Search for them.
So you've been both a mentor and a mentee, and I imagine that's an ongoing process. Why would I, if I'm on the beach, why would I come back and give 10 hours? Why would I do that? Why do people do that, do you think?
Because when you've worked a lifetime, a lot of people enjoy it. They're not waiting to get on the beach full time. They're willing to give some time back because they've enjoyed what they've done.
And what should we expect them to offer realistically? I mean, there's only so far you can go before they say, right, this isn't free anymore.
Well, if they've been in business, then I think they can give you a lot of security as somebody to talk to, somebody to tell your problems to. The problem with being a one-man band or a one-woman band is, who do you talk to?
So that's this person.
That's the starting point. They may have an expertise in what you're doing, whether it be a creative business or manufacturing business or service business. They will have contacts in the business community. All this is very helpful.
I would assume that if you're looking for a mentor, then the sensible thing to do would be to seek out someone with a background in your industry, but I could be wrong.
It depends what your industry is. Maybe you need opposites. Maybe if you're creative but are useless at administration, maybe you need some.
Hand up to that one, Gerald.
Which one are you useless at? Creative or administration?
I'm useless at admin, and I think you know it.
Then you don't have to worry about the administration because they will ensure it's kept up to date. I've seen geniuses. In fact, I got involved with a genius once in a deal. He had wonderful ideas, but couldn't make them happen in reality. That was my job. And in 1987, we bought the propellers off the QE2 and made golf clubs out of them, which were sold through St Andrews. Wow. Now, everybody thought it was stark staring mad. If I tell you the sets that went to Japan went for £10,000 a set, when a set of golf clubs was 300. And it was that mix. He'd have these ideas, and I'd say, what are you going to do with them? And he'd say, don't know, but we're going to do it. And then I'd sit there and be hard-nosed and make it happen.
That's what it needs, isn't it? That yin and yang.
Yes.
For every business.
No, sometimes you've got to be similar because otherwise you fall out. If you're the certain personality, you start disagreeing and it's not constructive necessarily. So it depends on who you are as to who you should be looking for. I mean, if anybody's got a brilliant idea, I'm more than willing either to look at it myself or pass you to somebody else I know who would look at it.
And if you are that person with a brilliant idea, or you think you are, stay with us, because before the end of the show, we'll give you Gerald's email address. Now, we also want to look today within this episode.
Could I just say, the one thing I would say to young people who are going into business for the first time, it is better to have 50 or 60% of something worthwhile than 100% of nothing. A lot of mentors, not necessarily me, but a lot of mentors want a percentage of the business for their input. Now, depending what the input is, that's worthwhile. Don't be frightened to give a minority stake away. Don't give it all away.
Good advice, as always. Now, we wanted to look today also within this episode at preparing cash flow for living expenses. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, if you're a 1 or 2 man band, your first duty is to keep a roof over your head and put food on the table. So I always say to somebody, how much does it cost you to live each month? I've never met anybody who knows, to be honest. So I give them a form. I say, fill it out and then put 2 columns, necessities and luxuries, and establish how much you need to cover your necessities and how much more you need to cover other things you'd like to do. It's amazing what people think are necessities.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it's a hard conversation you have to have with yourself, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you have to speak to your wife about it as well.
Oh, I don't want to do that, Gerald. I don't want to do that. But you have to have the money for your own living expenses.
Yeah, you have to know what this business model can produce and how does it match your expectations of living. How much is your rent? How much is your mortgage? That's a necessity. Sending kids on holiday or public school, I'm afraid, you might think it's a necessity, but it falls in the luxury column at the moment.
What about going to the football when it comes back? That's a necessity, Gerald, surely.
That's an ultra necessity.
You're going to say only if it's Leeds that you're going to watch. Yeah, I know.
Well, no, I mean, how many years before 40,000 people in a stadium?
I don't know. That's another one of those classic unknowns.
That's the problem. Football is facing a similar problem to the aviation industry. And I'm going to cover that in one of my podcasts next week.
Yeah, I know it's something you've prepared for thoroughly by compiling a report on. There's the Premiership and the first and the second.
I know, but my firm, Beggar's Trainer, we produce every year a health report on the Premiership, Championship, and Divisions 1 and 2, saying how many clubs are in trouble and what the situation is. and I'm comparing the situation I've just finished this year's at December 19 to today, and it's vastly different.
Well, it's bound to be, isn't it?
That's a whole program in itself.
Well, exactly, and that's
sure
going to
we'll get a lot of questions on that, and hopefully, if you could send them in before next week, we'll cover them.
Yeah, okay. I will give you that email address at the end of today's program. Going back to today, though, I guess with this change of business model and a drop in profits, you've got to make up the shortfall somewhere. Should you be trying for a second job? I mean, who's going to be hiring?
Well, there used to be something called jobs for life. If you worked in a bank, you worked in a lawyer, that's gone. That's not ever coming back. And I think people will have 4, 5, 6 jobs over a working lifetime, unless they create their own business. But some people I'm dealing with at the moment are doing 2 jobs on flexi time to get the income they need.
We mentioned this briefly last week. Is it a time to consider a second business?
Depends what your situation. Everything comes back to your situation, your enthusiasm, your personality, and your drive.
But there are opportunities out there post-lockdown.
I think obviously. A lot of people are considering putting their existing business to bed and starting a new one. Now, if you've got a manufacturing business with 300 people, that's not so easy. You can't do that very easily. If you're a 1 or 2 man band, you can close down a business and reset it up. And you have to understand what the constraints are for doing that. And as I said, that will be dealt with in a future podcast.
Just briefly on that, I assume that there are different variables in terms of shutting down a business, what you have to do legally and what your moral requirements might be, perhaps.
Yes, yeah. The legal one's easy to explain. In times of hardship, people think anything goes. Well, it does at the time you do it, but it can come back and bite you 6 months later. So the secret is to take advice, get the advice in writing. Don't listen to people, I was going to say in pubs, but nobody goes there. Don't listen to verbal advice. Get the advice in writing.
If you're in Italy, don't listen to someone on the other side of the partition. So today, we've been looking at the changes in business models. In summary, Gerald, what should we take away from today's show? We're looking slightly further down the line, assuming that you negotiated the first part of coming out of lockdown.
Right.
What do we take away?
Recrafting your business to meet the new world we're going in. That is the overall thing. There are people to help you there. Guidance can be given. You've got the bounce back loans if you want to use that to recraft your business, and I understand people have already received money from them. And that's an overall summary. But you're going to have questions. Where do you go for answers? Well, you can email me or you can go to your accountant. But for God's sake, take advice.
The best time to take advice was yesterday, as Gerald has taught me over the previous few broadcasts. So thanks for joining me on this episode of Business Rescue. If you do need help, Begbie's Trainer is there for you. They have experts in business restructuring as well as closure options and financial options at 78 offices across the UK. And if your business finds itself in need of help, you can also contact Gerald directly. Now, this is going to apply, this email address that's coming up will apply for questions for next week's programme as well, where we're going to look specifically at the world of football and how that as a business is going to move forward. So Gerald's email address is gerald@businessrestructure.co.uk. That's Gerald, Gerald, at businessrestructure, all one word, .co.uk. Please remember to rate, review and subscribe on Apple. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can follow us on social media as well. You can get us on Facebook at Business Rescue, Twitter at Business Rescue 6, that's number 6, so at Business Rescue 6, and on Instagram at Business Rescue Pod. Or if you prefer to watch us so you can appreciate Gerald's dreamy good looks, we have a video version as well, which you'll find on YouTube. We've got all the links that you need on our social media, as I said. Good luck with your business, and we'll see you next time on Business Rescue.